Assalamu alaikum. Welcoming you to a presentation on the general anatomy of joint. Let me fix the objectives. We'll discuss the general idea on joint. We'll classify the joint. I will describe each type of joints with example, and finally the general anatomy of synovial joint will be discussed. Other two types of joints will be discussed in the subsequent part of video. What is actually joint? Joint is actually the union of two or more bones. They will be articulated in such a way that they may be bending at that point, may be possible or may not be. So what are the other names of the joints? It's the arthrosis or articulation. Why joint is required? The skeletons are formed by several bones. Each bones are separated and grow in a different rate. So this skeleton is completed by the joint, keeping the possibility of growing with different rates. The joint is such a mechanism that prevents the displacement of the two bones or more bones. In this way, it keeps the skeleton intact and transmit the weight nicely, supporting the different parts of the bodies at their position. So it is responsible for keeping the different parts of the body in their place and helping them to perform this function in a proper way. At the place of the joints, we can bend. With the help of that, we can move forward by running or walking, and this is called locomotion. Joints occurs between two or more bones, so it has role of the surface forming the joint and also the binding material. So classifications are based on the manner how the bones are articulated with each other and the binding materials which connect. Joint may be solid type, other name is synarthrosis, may be cavitate, that is known as diarthrosis. In solid joint, bones are connected together and the gap is filled up with connective tissue. On the other hand, the bones are connected and the gap remains. The gap is filled up with fluid and the area is covered by fibrous capsule sheet to keep the fluid in position. Solid joint means synarthrosis may be of two types. Articulation fibrosa, this is fibrous joint, and here the bones are connected by ligaments. This is the connective tissue, dense connective tissue sheet. The second type is articulation cartilaginea, means cartilaginous joint. The bones are connected by piece of cartilage. This is one type of connective tissue. So on the basis of binding material, actually joints are classified into three types. The synovial joint, this is the example of the synovial joint. The second one is the fibrous joint. This is one type of fibrous joint, and third one is the cartilaginous joint. So synovial joint has cavity filled with fluid and there is fibrous capsule. In case of fibrous joint, the gap between the bones are filled up with connective tissue that is very tough, ligaments. The gap is filled up with cartilage in case of cartilaginous joint. So there will be wide range of movement in case of synovial joint, which the movement is restricted or absent in case of fibrous and cartilaginous joint. What are the characteristics of synovial joint? You see the participating bones has articular surface. So ends of the bone that is taking part in the joint formation are covered by cartilage. These are usually hyaline cartilage known as articular cartilage. The joint means the bone participating ends of the bones are covered by thick sheet of connective tissue called the fibrous capsule. The arrow is indicating the fibrous capsule. So this encloses a cavity inside that is known as synovial cavity, the joint cavity, and it is filled up with fluid that is known as synovial fluid. The inner surface of the capsule as well as the part of the bone that remains within the joint but not covered by the articular cartilage, these two areas are covered by a thin membrane. This is known as synovial membrane. The red line is showing the inner surface of the capsule covered by the synovial membrane, and now red dotted lines, this is indicating the bony surface that remains within the joint cavity but not covered by articular cartilage or covered by synovial membrane. There may be some intra-articular structure. Here I have shown in the left side the intra-articular disc that may separate the joint cavity into different compartments or may keep it partially separated. Now let us discuss one by one each component of the synovial joint. First, articular cartilage. This is specialized hyaline cartilage, but in some joints you may get other type of cartilage, means fibrocartilage. Fibrocartilage is found at the two ends of the clavicle, making the joint sternoclavicular joint and acromioclavicular joints. It is also present the temporomandibular joint formed by the head of the mandible and mandibular fossa of the temporal bone. What are the functions of articular cartilage? Articular cartilage covers the joint surfaces that is exposed to the friction. So this cartilage makes the surface smooth, allowing a frictionless movement over it. You see, this cartilage can be deformed on pressure. So deformity allows the cartilage to be more congruent. The surfaces are made more congruent to each other. This is a very good shock absorber. That's why it is known as biochemical spring. Now, fibrous capsule. Fibrous capsules cover the ends of the bone that participates in the joint formation. So this is shown in the figure, a fibrous capsule. This is the fibrous capsule in the section of the joint. So it's a thick sheet of dense connective tissue. It's completely enclosing the joint, and its function is to stabilize the joint, and it contains the special receptors that is responsible for proprioceptions. Means this is helping to indicate the position of the joints, movements of the joint. Ligaments. These are the thick bands of connective tissue, may remain fused with the fibrous capsule, may remain outside the joint capsule or inside the joint cavity. So the ligaments who remain intricately or fused with articular capsule are known as intrinsic ligaments. You can see the hip joint and very thick three bands of ligaments make the fibrous capsule very thick. Accessory ligaments remains a bit away from the fibrous capsule, maybe outside the fibrous capsule. This is collateral ligament of the knee joint. This is extra articular ligament and may remain within. This is within that knee joint. We will get ACL labeled ligament means it is anterocruciate ligament. There is another ligament, posterior cruciate ligament. So these are the intra-articular ligaments. Ligament actually stabilizes the joint. It permits movement in one plane and prevent movement in other planes. It limits the range of movements so that bones remains together. It prevents displacement of the participating bone during movement. Synovial membrane. It's a thin membrane. It covers, you see the figure, you can see the inside of the capsule and also the part of the bone. I'm showing this by the arrow. This is the capsule and this is the synovial membrane that covers the inner surface of the fibrous capsule, and arrow indicating the part of the bone not covered by the articular cartilage but lying within the joint is also covered by the synovial membrane, and within this synovial membrane covered cavity a fluid remains that is known as synovial fluid. This synovial membrane is epithelial lined membrane that composed of special type of synovial cells that forms a layer, and another layer of connective tissue is there containing fibers like collagen fibers and very vascular layer to give nutrition and help the cells to produce synovial fluid. There is variable amount of adipose tissue in this connective tissue. It varies from joint to joint. So this cell produces synovial fluid that works as the lubricant and also contains some cell who can phagocyte the bad elements and keep the synovial fluid clean. This synovial fluid lies within the synovial cavity, that is lined by synovial membrane externally covered by fibrous capsule, and also the bones are covered by the cartilage. This is pale yellow, viscous, thick and slightly alkaline fluid. It's a very little amount. The maximum 0.5 ml is present in the knee joint, which is a very large joint. So on movement, the pH moves towards the acidity. This fluid, lubricating fluid, helps the joint to have a frictionless movement and also provides nutrition to the articular cartilage who are avascular. Articular cartilage actually gets nutrition from the bones that it covers and also from the synovial fluid. Synovial joint classified depending on the shape of the participating surfaces, articular surfaces. These are the type I have shown on the left side. One by one I will describe each of them with example. So let us start with the plane type. The two plane surfaces are opposed together in this type of joint. So examples are, this is intercarpal, between the carpal bones, and say this is the joint of the vertebral body with the head of the ribs. It is the costovertebral. Also there is joint between the articular processes. So the surfaces are plane, so only a gliding movement is possible. This movement is named as translation. Let's move to hinge variety. It is uniaxial and has strong collateral ligament on either side. Hinge means is the present in the doors. A door can be moved in one direction only, rotating around single axis. You see this elbow joint, this is the collateral ligament that prevents lateral movement, but only in the anteroposterior movement is possible. So it is moving in around one axis. So elbow joint is this hinge variety. Interphalangeal joint is also hinge variety. Movement possibles here are flexion and extension. Let's move to the pivot variety. Pivot variety means one ring is there. This ring may composed of bone and ligaments together. Here I have shown the superior radioulnar joint. The arrow is indicating the ligamentous part of the ring, and the left figure is showing the bony part. So this is superior radioulnar joint. So movement possible is rotation. Atlantoaxial joint is also pivot variety and allow rotation movement only. Let's move to ellipsoid. The very terminology is indicating that one surface of the bone participating joint is concave in nature, another is shaped elliptically. So convex and concave surfaces are there and shape is elliptical in nature. You can see in the figure metacarpophalangeal joint, that is ellipsoid in nature. The radiocarpal means wrist joint is also ellipsoidal in nature. So movement possible in two axes. Let's move to the saddle. It is also indicating that the joints have a particular surface shape, is concavo-convex. The shaded joint is the first metacarpal joint, and also the medial end of the clavicle articulates with the sternal body, sternum membrane sterni, to form the sternoclavicular joint. Both the joints are saddle type and movement possible in two axes. Ball and socket. The name indicates that one of the participating bone forms a ball and second one is the socket. You can see the two figures, one is the hip joint and another is the shoulder joint. Two are the examples. Movement possible in multiple axes. Bicondylar joint. Condyle means expanded part of the bone. You see the participating bones are expanded and makes joints. These are condylar joints. The knee joints. This is not a typical hinge joint, but they allow uniaxial with limited second axis movement, means flexion and extension possible with a limited rotations are possible. Another way of classifying depending on the complexity of the joint. So it may be simple. You see the figure, the shoulder joint, the two bones are participating to make the joints. If you see the second one, the elbow joint, the joint is formed by the three bones. So two surfaces participating to form the joint is simple. If the joint surface is more than two, it is compound. Complex means there is some disc inside the joint. Interarticular disc means as an example we can say meniscus of the knee joint, which can separate the joint totally or may separate it partially. In either case, the joint is called complex. So we can give example. Shoulder is the simple joint, elbow is the compound joint, and knee is the complex variety of synovial joint. How the joint stability is maintained? It depends on the articular surface. You see, if the surfaces are congruent, the joints will be more stable. Like hip joint, they are congruent as well as proportionate. But look at the shoulder joint, this head of the shoulder is not proportionate to the glenoid cavity. So the participant joints are congruent, but it is not proportionate. So hip joint is more stable than the shoulder joint. Ligaments tightly binds the bones together. They allow movement in a particular plane and prevent movements. This also prevents displacement of the bone, means separation of the bone during movements. Muscle is the major stabilizing factor. It keeps the bone heads, bone participating bone together. And the last we can say the joint cavity is a sealed one. So whenever the bones tries to separate during movement, the negative pressure created helps to keep the bone participating bones together. Thank you very much for staying with